Hi, I'm Ben Smith, and this video accompanies our article in the Science Teacher magazine for the Science 2.0 column. And this month we are talking about teaching the facts about climate change. Now, recently, I've been able to give a few talks to students about fake news. And one of the disturbing trends that I found is that when I say fake news, lots of students say things like CNN. So this month, we're going to take a look at some of the old topics that we've covered over the past year or so and how we can incorporate them to create a nice lesson where students are responsible for gathering their own facts and then teaching or communicating out their information, what they found. So we're going to start with going back to the ISTE standards, and I would remind you about that standard on creative communicator. And we had talked about what this might mean. Like students communicate clearly and express themselves creatively for a variety of purposes using the platforms and so on. But what they're trying to do is communicate clearly. And when we look down in here, we see that students communicate complex ideas clearly and effectively. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about when we think about this type of data. Now, in the article, we point you to a couple of sources that you can take a look at, such as climate.gov, where you can go in and if you notice it says maps and data, and if you click on that, it will actually give you places where you can go and get snapshots of the maps, and you can actually browse the dataset gallery. Now, remember, we talked previously about taking authentic data, real data, and having students take a look at it. And in this particular topic, this is a great activity. And I would point out that you may say, well, climate change doesn't necessarily fit with my curriculum, but I'm pretty sure that it will fit with a lot of different things that we might think about in terms of the scientific method, analyzing data, certainly in math classes. So this is a great place to be able to go to. So if I were to click further in, like record high and low daily temperatures in the US, and what you'll find is that the directions are here. Now this is a little bit more complicated because you're going to have to get um, the the data emailed out to you. So you'd have to have an email address, and you'll see that they talk about like where you might be able to find this particular data as you go through. So you just want to be careful about those types of data sets. But I want to focus on the other website that we talked about where NASA's global climate change, and it points to a number of lessons for educators. So we highlighted some of these in here already, but I'm going to go back and look at the JPL climate change lessons. And for those lessons, the really interesting thing is that you can get all kinds of classroom activities for a variety of grade levels that are really appropriate. But what drew me in was this graphing global temperature trends. And when I clicked into that area, what you'll find is I can download right global annual mean temperature data as a text file or a CSV file. Now in this particular case, I want to take it as a CSV file. And you can see that they actually talk about like how to manipulate the data and how to work with a variety of different students. And what I really like is it has over 1,600 data points present in a single file, so you can start to use this to manipulate your own graphs. So if you download that file as a CSV, it's going to open up in Excel. And we might recognize like here, this is particular data from 1880 all the way up to 2016. And so this is the type of data that we might get. And so this was the actual temperature versus the year. And we can see what's happening in terms of the trend. And we could ask students to maybe go in and take a look, you know, and you could narrow down the set that they have to look at to see what might have happened. Like what would have happened if you were sort of looking right in here at these particular years, or uh, what might have happened. Like we talked about researching for other events. Um, what may have happened in those years that may have contributed to that. So one of the big things that we do find is that if you're thinking about Excel, we would go to tools and then we would go to that data analysis tool pack, and then when we click on this, like we can do regression lines. So we've also talked about using Excel, and so if we jump to like that same file, and I've already uploaded it into my Google Drive here, And how do we use slides to do the same thing? Well, remember we talked about using add-ons. And so I was looking for an add-on that would allow me to do the same type of thing, and it turns out there is one. It's called Excel Minor Analysis Tool Pack. And I did this by, uh, although it's called up here, remember you can only do this within the spreadsheet. So I click here, I go to add-ons and get add-ons. You can see I already have some of them that we discussed previously. And so I got to this point here and I said, okay, I want to do linear regression. What tool might be there? As another reminder of some things we talked about in the past, I usually look at the ratings. And this is a case where 4 stars is pretty good, and 64 is a significant number of people for this type of tool. And so when I am ready to use it, I can just click on the plus sign. It's going to ask me if I want to give permission. You should pay attention to what it's going to be able to do. And then once you click allow, that tool pack will now be available, and there it is. And so you can see that once I get to this point, I can close this, click on that tool pack, and after a few moments, it will allow me to start working with it. And it usually does take a few minutes for you to pull things up. So you can also start to take a look at what types of things this is going to allow you to do. Now, that's only one piece of the puzzle. So this is where the students do all the analysis. But I want to go back and think about creative communicator again. Students communicate clearly. Well, so what are some tools that students might use? And I think that we often fall back on something like PowerPoint or Google Slides, but I just was sort of looking, I want my students to be creative. And so I was looking for some tools like Animaker. And so I look and see, is this the type of tool that I could probably use for free? Like if a student were to do it or to allow them to do it. And you can see, well, for free, I can do $0. I can make a 2-minute video. That probably is enough for me to be able to make one. So if my students were interested, I would also remind you that if you're going to just go use a tool like this, you have to make sure, as we talked about in another earlier video, about COPA and making sure that this is a tool that you check with your tech folks to make sure that students have the ability to make use of it by putting it onto that list that parents approve. Powtoons is another great place where we can do some work and allow students to sort of creatively work through how they want to express themselves. And then finally, if you're still with me, I've set something up in a new tool that we've been using lately called Flipgrid. And Flipgrid's been around a little while, but it's a free tool if you have one grid and you can have multiple topics. And so I've created a topic called the Science Teacher Reflection. And you can make a 1 minute and 30-second video. So what we'd like you to do is to answer these types of questions, like what did you learn from the October Science 2.0 column? And did you manipulate any of the data we discussed? And if so, what did you find out? And so I'm going to create my topic. And you can, if you jot this down now, you can go to this link right here. And when you go to that link, you're going to be brought to our Flipgrid. You don't need an account. You can just go ahead and you can make a quick video reflection on what it is that you found out. And so for students, this is a great way to close out a class period where you may have them making graphs and things like that and talk their way through their analysis, their communication piece. It's a great tool for them to practice just communicating effectively and allowing others to see it and comment on it so that you can work through there. And so we don't have any responses, of course, yet, but as soon as you guys have them, you can stop back and take a look, and we'll see if we can entice anybody to report out on this. So just remember that as we think about the idea of fake news and getting students to analyze data, that it's really important that they not only be able to analyze that data, but be able to communicate it out effectively.